decision. I'll face the sunny side head on. I had a vision of what it might be like to reach.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to our Thursday episode. We have special guest Kate Anthony in studio. She's got the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, which I started listening to, and I love it. Which people know that I just came out of a divorce.
What?
I don't know if you know that.
That's so. Why are you hiding stuff from us, Lynette?
Spoiler alert. It was just finalized recently.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Also, she has a book.
Yes.
And it's called The D Word, and it just came out, right, in December?
Yep.
Yeah.
December
awesome.
26th.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I think this book is going to help a lot of people. I'm sure it already is helping a lot of people.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I just started listening to your podcast recently, and just the few episodes I listened to was extremely eye-opening and really helpful.
I'm so glad. Thank you. Yeah.
Because, people go through a divorce. Stefanie doesn't know, but this is like a whole new especially when, I was with the person for 25 years.
Right.
Pretty much my whole adult life. So then you're kind of like, are you starting over? Well, you are starting over, but it's, it is a new period. It's nice to have a show like yours that people can come and listen to and feel like, that you're not alone kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Because I never thought about it. Like, oh, maybe I need some support after this. I don't know. I just relied on my friends.
I think I did the same thing. I was like, I'm fine. And you probably appreciate this, Stefanie. Like, I was like, I'm fine. And then after like 10 years of like my drinking increasing and like, things, I was finally like, I think maybe there's some trauma that I dealt with. Maybe there's something to this, right? And so it is important to acknowledge and be intentional about the transition and how hard it is and and to heal, right? Because I know when I got out, I was like, woohoo, I'm out, I'm done, I'm fine. And then, 10 years later, I was like, oh, look, I don't actually think I'm fine.
I wonder, too, if there's a misconception that if the woman is the one who asked for the divorce, that like, what are you complaining about? Like, you're the one that left. Like, I think people see a woman who, if the guy is cheating and he leaves you, like, then you get to be a victim. But if you're the one who made the decision, then people don't feel sorry for you.
Right.
I think there's
some thing.
Yeah, there's some of that. But also we do that to ourselves. The number of women that I talk to in my Facebook groups or wherever, and they're like, I wanted this. Why am I so unhappy? Why am I grieving? Why can't I get over it? Why am I crying all the time? And my first response is, first of all, nobody wants this. Nobody wants this.
Right.
None of us got married thinking like, I can't wait to get divorced now. Right? Nobody wants it. But also, there is a transition, and there is grief in every transition, even the ones that are exciting. Even, graduating high school, right? Mm-hmm. There's grief in that. We're going, maybe you're going to college and you're leaving your home and your childhood bedroom or whatever it is, right? Even if it's joyous, there's grief. There's very little about divorce that's joyous.
Right.
Other than perhaps sometimes that freedom of like, I can be myself finally. I'm not walking on eggshells. There is a lot of freedom, depending on the marriage that you were in. But, I think there's judgment from outside, but even more so internally. What's wrong with me?
Right.
Why am I grieving?
Right.
Let's talk about, I think this is really interesting. Speaking about like walking on eggshells, right? Mm-hmm. Do you feel like, I feel like a lot of people convince themselves that this is just how relationships are because I know
compromise.
Right. Like, and it must be hard to help people like as a coach see that like, that some things are compromises. But how do you know and how do you help people see that, like, no, there's a lot of stuff that, like, you could be so much happier right now. Like, you shouldn't have to put up with that. That's not normal.
Right. I think part of it is if you're compromising yourself, that's a problem. You can compromise things. You can compromise, who's gonna, I think it's also a matter of negotiation. And in a negotiation, both people come to the table. They're both giving, they're both taking, whatever that is. But when you're compromising yourself and you're compromising who you are and you're compromising your values and you're compromising your highest self, that's not okay.
Right.
Because the relationship should be exalting those things. The relationship should be lifting those things up.
Right.
Right? The relationship should be feeding who you are, not taking away from it.
Yeah, the compromising yourself. Sometimes I feel, and this is just from friends and like a lot of people that I know, seems like their partner might have like a personality disorder. And, the personality disorders can be so tricky.
Yes.
So you end up thinking like a lot of stuff is your own fault and that you're just not being like loving enough, or you're not being accepting enough, or you're wanting crazy things, or, and then the partner who has a personality disorder, it can turn things around on you and gaslight you and make you feel like, well, I guess I'm just being crazy, or I guess I'm being irrational. Like, how do you help somebody see that, like, no, you're not, you know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, you just had someone on your show
day.
that talked about narcissism and being in a
Dr.
relationship.
Romney. I had Dr. Romney on talking about it.
It was really interesting.
She's like the queen of narcissism. And, so narcissism itself is not a personality disorder. Narcissistic personality disorder is a personality disorder. Narcissism really exists on a spectrum. But if we're talking about personality disorders, right, this is a fixed thing. This is not something that is treatable. It's not something that you can change. There is some theory and research that borderline personality disorder you can be helped if you have borderline, but again, you have to want it. And most people are not diagnosed. There's the diagnosis rate for narcissistic personality disorder is really low, not because they don't exist, but because they're not seeking help. Nobody's walking in.
They think they're fine.
They think they're fine.
Everybody else is the problem.
Everyone else is the problem.
Yeah.
And they might be diagnosed if they go in for something else, like addiction or something, and then the diagnosis is co-occurring. But they're really not seeking treatment because they really don't think that there's anything wrong. But we, as the victims, as the people in relationship with these people, because the partner is always saying, there's nothing wrong with me. This sounds like a you problem. You're the problem. If you would just, then we would. And if you could just shift your way of being, or change your voice, or, drop a few pounds, or, get a boob job, like, then I would be attracted to you. Then I would want to spend time with you. Then you would be good enough for me. All of the things, right? And it, whittles away our sense of self and who we are. But because we are coming to the relationship as normal people, right? As, with who are capable of empathy and an exchange, right? We think that your partner also has the same worldview. I love you. I want to be in relationship with you. And so I think that that's what you want too. But when your partner has a personality disorder, especially narcissistic personality disorder, they want power and control over you. That's all they want. And so whatever they tell you needs to change about you in order for you to be good enough or
Make
get
them
the
happy.
love,
Yeah.
right? It's always changing. Because you hit the target and like, that wasn't quite right? Because then it's the game's done.
Right.
So what you're constantly, but you are trying to connect in the way that you did in the beginning, which by the way was a game to them, right? It wasn't real love and connection, but we have a hard time understanding that different worldview. that someone is just out for power and control. We really think that like, well, I'm in this relationship for love and connection. I thought you were in it for love and connection. So we're just trying to get back to that.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's very difficult to recognize, and what I have to help women sort of wrap their brains around, is that the thing that you were sold never existed. The person you fell in love with was a mask. And that was a game. And that wasn't real, right? And that feels so real to them that the idea that it wasn't real to the other person is devastating. Devastating. And so I guess to your question, Stefanie, like how do I help people, right? And a lot of it is education, right? I really have sort of a broad three-step process, right? I don't I'm into like processes necessarily, but the first thing we have to do is the self-work to really start to reconnect with that part of ourselves that we've lost, which is hard to do while you're still in the relationship, right? But if you're already questioning and you're starting to hear that voice and you're starting to go, there's something not right here, we can start to work with that self-connection, reconnecting with who actually am I? Who am I now, right? As an adult, as a mother, and what are my values, right? And that can be very enlightening for people when they do the values work with me. They're like, oh my God, this is just like, we don't share values at all.
Right.
Right? And that's like, whoa. And then the next step is really the education piece. Like, this is what abuse looks and feels like. This is what narcissism looks and feels like. This is what, like, let's take this, like, let's get educated on this stuff and see if it applies. And very often it's like when you put that overlay like onto the relationship, it's like, oh, everything makes sense now.
Right.
Now it all makes sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's weird because like I was in a relationship many, many years ago and it was so hard because I'm like, it's resonating with me what you're saying about the beginning, because the beginning was so different. The first like couple months was so different than the rest of the relationship. And I felt so focused on and loved and I felt the excitement and I felt like, we really get along so well and have the same sense of humor and I had the most fun. And then it changed where I was always kind of doing something wrong, or I was, it wasn't enough, or I wasn't paying the right kind of attention to him, or I was paying too much attention to him. And I started to get, and it really made it tapped into old real insecurities. So I got really insecure and needy. And I always say, even looking back, I never would have left that relationship. Like he left me because I got so addicted to like any validation. So then he got really inconsistent. Yeah. Like sometimes he was nice to me, but sometimes he was super distant. And then that would make me go, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? How can I be better? How can I please him? And it was such a negative, the end was so negative. And he left me. And then
which is very rare, right? Which is very rare because what you're talking about, that cycle and that addictive cycle is a trauma bond. So it's that you're addicted to the high, right? And it's interesting. We're actually not even just addicted to the dopamine hit that we get. We're actually addicted to the anticipation of it, right? And so we're waiting for that to come. We know it's coming. We know it's coming. We know it's coming. And like, oh, there it is, right? And we're actually addicted to that dopamine hit, right? And the anticipation of it. And then they take it away. Right. And so it's very rare.
Would they be addicted to that? On their side, would it seem like they could be addicted to having somebody giving me?
Oh, they're addicted to the power and control.
I see.
But weirdly, this guy.
Yeah, he left you. That's very rare.
He left me. And also he ended up married to his next relationship, and they're still married. They have kids. Like, I don't know anything about his relationship, but like that then makes you feel insecure about yourself even more. Cause you're like, well, maybe it was me.
Right.
Maybe I was causing
100%
behavior because he's certainly able to have a great relationship with somebody else.
Well, and I think, I don't know enough about this relationship or whatever, but it also sounds like he had some avoidant tendencies, right?
Yes.
And it triggered your anxious attachment.
Yes.
And so maybe he married someone who was more avoidant than him or was more secure. And so it works differently. Right. So it might not have been the same intentional sort of personality disorder driven thing or narcissistic driven thing that we're talking about. I mean, it could have just been that he's avoidant or disorganized, which is even more like chaotic.
What's that?
Disorganized attachment is like they're all over the place. So, right, they're all in, and then you start to come in, and then they go all out, and then they're like, but they want it, but they don't want it, right? And so you start to feel like crazy.
That's how he was.
And you start to feel crazy.
Because he would cry and say how much he loved me, but he's just not sure. Like, he's just not 100% sure if I'm the one.
Yes, right.
Like, but then he'd be like, but you're everything. I love you so much. And then he'd be like, you're too much. I need space.
Yeah,
Hot
that
and
sounds
cold.
pretty disorganized.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a little different from like narcissism or
I don't think he was a narcissist. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I still really
But you
played
start
into
to-
a lot of blaming myself and like, how can I be better? And I felt addicted to the relationship.
So
Absolutely.
what was that called? Disorganized
Disorganized attachment.
attachment.
It's one of the attachments, there's a great, amazing woman on Instagram called the Attachment Nerd, Eli Harwood, and she's amazing. And she's so good on the attachment stuff. And we just talked about this on my podcast. I think it's coming out this week, maybe. I don't remember. But it's really interesting how there are different names, depending on whose study you're, whose research you're following. But
that's
it's a
interesting.
deep, rich
Yeah.
body of behavioral science.
Should we take a quick break? Yeah, let's take a break. So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of women struggle with like, how do I know when this relationship is more bad than good? Do you have any like signs? Or I know you did say the thing about if you're giving up like yourself, but that's vague, right? Like,
yes.
Are there any concrete things that like how much fighting or how much or like, to help women decide?
So I think what I, in my book.
Yes.
Yes, of course. Sell that book, girl.
I have a, right?
The D word.
I have a healthy relationship checklist.
Okay.
Which I think is important because what it asks you to do, instead of looking at the relationship and what it has and like, what does a healthy relationship look like? I don't know. My relationship looks different from that, right? How do you feel in this relationship? This really should be about how you feel. And in the checklist, I have things like, I feel emotionally safe in my relationship, right? And if you're in a healthy, happy relationship, first of all, people who are in healthy, happy relationships are not asking, should I stay or should I go? They're not waking up at 3:00 in the morning going, I don't know, is this relationship working for me? Like, no,
Right.
you're happy, you're fine, right?
That's really true.
Right?
I sometimes do take those quizzes on like HuffPo or like if your husband is doing one of these 8 things, you're not in a good relationship. And I know I am in a good relationship, but I will look at it anyway.
Right.
And then,
Right.
Yeah.
And get confirmed that you're actually fine.
Yeah.
Right? Right. And so people
But that's
who are...
because I like taking random quizzes.
Because you're right. That has to do with the quiz, not John. Right. So, do you feel emotionally safe? Are you able to freely express yourself and your opinions are heard and honored?
Right.
Do you feel physically safe in your relationship? Right.
That's a big one.
It's a big one. I feel completely free to be myself around my partner. Let me tell you, I sure did not. This is the walking on eggshells thing, right? Like, do you ever feel like you're walking on eggshells in your marriage? Like,
never.
right.
No.
Right? You can be free.
But I did in previous relationships.
Right.
Yes, very much so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You should feel safe to have and express your feelings.
Yeah.
Right? If you say, I feel sad today, or I feel kind of bummed about the way that you talked to me earlier, you know, instead of it being turned around on you, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe you'd say that to me. Well, now I feel, you know, and now suddenly we're talking about your feelings and my feelings are gone. What? Right? You know, in a healthy relationship, when you say, I feel bummed about the way you talked to me earlier, their response should be, oh my God, honey, I'm so sorry. I was such a dick. Right? Or like, I did not mean that at all. That wasn't like, I was just, my head was, you know, up my ass or whatever.
Or I'll give you a third option for that, because I have had this situation with John where I'm like, I will say that John can sometimes get upset with me for being upset. Okay. But I also have to work on my own, like, listening. Like, it's sort of like, the thing that's healthy is that we both come to it. I feel free to say, listen, I don't like the way you talk to me, or I don't like the way that happened in that fight. And then John will say, okay, well, I'm sorry. You know, I also felt not heard or whatever. And then I feel like I have to be willing to also look at myself and go like, how am I coming at this? But in the end, we both always, he really does try to, he's like, I want to hear that. Right. I want to hear why you're upset. I want to hear your point of view. I also want you to hear my point of view.
Right. Well, what's with these guys? Because I've got a lot of friends too. And in their marriage, it's like, you know, I get mad at something that he said or whatever, and then now he's mad because I'm mad. Right. There's it's like that's like a common thread in a lot of people's marriage.
I think it's an ego wounding thing. It's I can't be wrong, and it's also, you know, I think one of the bigger issues, like it's of a more systemic issue, right? Which is we traditionally, historically, do not hold space for men to have feelings other than rage, right? And so I think guilt is a softer feeling, or, you know, feeling remorse. I think it's a harder space for men to lean into. We're so used to feeling that, right? We're guilty all the time, right? And I think that's a harder space for men to lean into. And so their first response is going to be defensiveness or anger.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know?
Right.
It's not good. It's not healthy, and it's doing damage to millions of relationships for sure. But I do think that that's, you know, an answer to the question, why do they do that?
Right.
Pretty much we don't give them space to be much of anything else, right?
Right.
Because if they are, right, God forbid, then they're labeled one of the two worst things a man can possibly be, right? A girl or gay. So, right. And that's how we tend to socialize boys.
Right.
You know, man up. Don't be a pussy. Right.
Yeah. So when people are going through, they decide to go, is it usually the person that's feeling taken advantage of by the other person, or like, cause you just said to Stefanie that rarely happens with he broke up with her.
Oh yeah. Right. Yes. With narcissists,
they usually.
Oh yeah. I mean, listen, as soon as you try to break up with a narcissist, they're going to usually pull out all the stops. The love bombing is going to start again. The promises, the person who was never going to go to therapy is now 100% willing to go to therapy. They'll do anything. They'll, right? Now they see the light. Now they understand. They're reading the books, right? This person has never picked up a book. They've never, right? Because it's the ultimate, they're losing.
Right.
Their supply, right? So the narcissistic supply, you are the supply. And if you're finally like, I cut it off, they're going to scramble, right? They tend to abuse only to the level at which they need to in order to maintain power and control. And so as soon as they feel like they've absolutely lost it, they're going to pull out all the stops. None of that is real. None of that is real. They will be on the best behavior. They'll fix everything in the house. They'll come home with flowers. They'll do all of the things. They won't actually call the therapist. They won't actually because what I tell my clients to do is like, okay, just sit back and wait. Sit back and wait and see what he does. Don't listen to the words. See what he does. And if you have an ounce of a fuck left to give, okay. Like maybe you go to that therapy appointment, but don't make it. And it usually lasts about 2 or 3 weeks.
And then it goes back to normal.
Of course.
Interesting.
Yeah. The thing about narcissists, and this is very hard for us to wrap our brains around. Narcissists, true narcissists, right? Someone who's been diagnosed as a narcissist. It's a very, we can look at a lot of set of behaviors and be like, yeah, right? It's pretty clear. They can't change, right?
Right.
And that is the hardest thing for us to wrap our brains around when you're in a relationship with them. Because first of all, they promise that they can. It seems like they can. They do for a little bit. And there's nothing that we can't change because we've spent our whole time in the relationship changing all sorts of things about us. But they actually cannot change. And they can learn new behaviors. They can learn what empathy looks like, but they can't feel it. They cannot be in the relationship the way that you and I are.
Right.
And that's a really hard thing for us to even begin to understand.
Now, what about people that have children in the middle of all this?
Yeah.
And, they grow up, how is it navigating a divorce with children and then what if you see like the same behaviors?
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's like, I'm just saying in general.
Yeah, sure.
What if you're seeing like the same behaviors that the way they treated you in a relationship that they're now doing like, little manipulation.
The children.
Yeah.
Sure. So there's 2 things that I would say about that. First of all children are narcissistic by nature. Their prefrontal cortex has not developed yet. They are not capable of the full breadth of empathy and all of that stuff that we are as grown-ups, right?
I mean, my kids are.
No. I mean, totally.
So, but I understand why you would say that.
I know, right?
My kids are pretty perfect. Yeah.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
I mean, same, but for everybody else.
Yeah, for other people.
Yeah. So I hear this all the time with women in my group. They're so scared. They're so scared that their kids are going to be just like their ex, right? And
is that what you're talking about, or are you saying what if you see the ex-partner treating the kids the way they treated their wife?
I'm talking about all of it. And there's the component of are they going to grow up to be like that and have those traits? Yeah. But I'm also talking about the way the person treated you in the marriage. You can start to see him treating the children that way. With a little bit of
they're going to be the supply now. Right. It's 2 things, right? And I think so the first one, let me just finish addressing the children behaving and mimicking the behaviors and all of those things. So actually, and I think this is true of both things, the very best thing that you can do for your children when you are married to a narcissist or an abuser, which are not always the same. All narcissists are abusive. Not all abusers are narcissists. And so when you're married to someone like this, the very best thing you can do is to get out. And the mistake that a lot of women make is that they stay in because they feel like they're trying to protect the children. And they feel like they're trying to create a container where they can come in and run interference or smooth things over or protect, right? And actually what they're doing is keeping their children in it 24/7. And so they're creating a blueprint for a relationship for their children that is really toxic. If you get out and you have 2 separate homes, even if one of them is toxic and even if one of them is full of narcissism and abuse and all of the things, if you have one home that you create that is full of love and empathy and kindness and safety, you're giving your children the gift of perspective. You give them a place for their central nervous system to settle. You give them a model for what love actually looks and feels like. And they start to notice the difference in how they feel, and they're able to choose.
Interesting.
Right? They're able to choose down the line. I feel safe at mom's house. I feel heard.
Right.
I feel seen. I feel controlled and manipulated and yelled at and scared at dad's. you know, and I love my dad, right? And like, of course, it's very complicated. And so that's, you know, in both cases, right? If the abuser is abusing the child emotionally, unfortunately, the legal system does not care about that. But they have a place that they can go for safety, right? So very often you remove yourself as the supply. Yeah, they're going to turn to the kids and they're going to try and get the kid to be the supply. And so having a kid in therapy is very important. Teaching a kid about boundaries is very important. They will come to you and say, I'm scared. Dad said this, or don't tell dad this. And, you know, you can say, you know, when I have learned that when talking with dad, these are really important boundaries. And here's the way I set those boundaries with dad to protect myself. Right. And so you work with it that way. When they start mimicking those behaviors because they want to align, you have to remember that you are the safe parent. You love them unconditionally, so they can behave however the hell they need or want to at your house. And very often when they come back from the other house, they're going to let it all out on you because you're the safe parent. And very often they're aligning with the unsafe parent because that love is conditional. And they know what the conditions are. And that can be really, really hard for the safe parent, otherwise also known as the protective parent, to deal with, because suddenly it might seem like they're abusing you in much the same way. And so your job, there's an amazing woman named Dr. Christine Cocciola, and she works with protective parents, and she does all this work. And she's a good friend of mine. She's amazing. She's been on my podcast a few times, and she deals with this about how to be a protective parent and how to hold that space for your children without, you know, calling them abusers, right? Because that's the last thing, the most terrifying thing. And it's really hard, but you have to kind of become their therapist in many ways, and just have this sort of unconditional empathy for what they're going through, even when it feels like you're being like shit on. It's hard.
Right.
Very hard.
It's interesting.
When I was a kid and my parents got divorced, and a couple of years into it, I remember that, and I only heard about what this is when I got older, but my father was a narcissist and my mother was probably the supplier. But he was like very grandiose and narcissistic. But when they divorced, I felt sorry for him because, you know, and it was emotional. Like, I felt like he would say like, you're all I have. You're my best friend. You're the only person who I can talk to. And it was so suffocating.
Of course.
And I wish that I didn't have to like spend time, and I felt responsible. Right.
Exactly. Well, you became his parent.
Fucked me up.
Yeah.
I had the same thing. Yeah. When you were talking about with the kids and the safe, and I had the same thing. I was thinking my dad was the safe place. My mother was the narcissist, because it's not like, I mean, it's not necessarily the guy all the time. It's it could be other way around, because my mom was a true narcissist in a crazy way too, by the way. But my dad was the safe space for me when they got divorced.
Right.
And then I started to resent my mother because I had to take care of her. I had to look after her. Yeah. She had me like wrapped around, you know, and then what happens? I don't know, do people usually go and find their love of their life and look for that person, you know, or
you mean
I don't know. Do they go and repeat it because they had a narcissistic parent?
Absolutely.
Do they find a narcissistic partner? Right.
I mean, usually, right?
Yeah.
And that's also, there is also this gray area. Like, not everybody is a diagnosable, like a true narcissist that's abusive.
Sure.
Like, there's so much
There's traits.
There's such a spectrum, right? And you can be with somebody who you're like, this doesn't feel good, but they're not doing something. They're not physically hurting me. I feel safe in my home. They're not going to, but they're not giving me like, but they're always right.
Yep.
They don't really listen to me. They don't support the things that I want to do. They make me feel like I'm never enough. Like there's all these things that but they're still like,
Right.
It doesn't look from the outside like, oh, this guy is a terrible guy. Not everybody would agree that they're a narcissist, right? But like what you, and I feel like that's a much trickier place to be when you're like, it seems like my friends' marriages are better than mine. But I don't know that my husband is doing enough shit to like leave him and like disrupt my whole life.
Right. How bad does it have to be?
Right.
Right. And so what I always say to women is that you deserve to be happy. You deserve to be happy.
Right.
Like there's why do we feel like it's not that bad. I guess I'll just suffer. Oh my God, this is your life. This is it. This is your life. Period. End of story. This one right here. Right? Is that really what you want? And is this what you want for your kids? Because they will repeat it.
Right. Yeah.
Let's take another quick break.
Oh, we're back. So when you get out, let's say, okay, you get out of a relationship. I was listening to your show and your guest was talking about detox, a 1 year detox. And can you explain what she was talking about?
Well, she was saying that when you get out of a relationship, like I think any relationship, really like a long-term intense relationship, but in particular a relationship with a narcissist, you need a year before you before you even start dating. You have to find out who you are. When you've been in a relationship with someone and the whole time it has been like a systematic deconstructing of yourself and an abandonment of self, so you've got it from outside and from within.
Okay.
Right? Like, but that's necessary, right? There's no wrong, right? It's not wrong. It's self-preservation. This, consistent, slow, abandoning of self and denying of who you are. You need time to rebuild it. You need at least a year of coming home after work and just like being with yourself and your cats and your journal and like your kids half the time, if that's what it is. Right? Like to fill that time with self-generation as opposed to, what I did, right? I was drinking a lot. I was shopping a lot. I was keeping busy. I was having parties. I was going out. I was dating. I was having a lot of sex, and it took a toll. It took a huge toll. And then, 10 years later when I quit drinking and it was all still there. All the trauma was just waiting.
Right.
Right. And so the intentionality of taking a year to reconnect with self and who you are now in this new realm and to reparent yourself because probably you got to this relationship because of where you came from. And so now we're rewriting the script. And by the way, you're stopping the generational trauma. You're stopping the pattern. You're breaking the cycle. You are breaking the cycle here and now. And that takes something for yourself.
Right. So you also you have a website where people can do the survey, which I did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. It's tell us the website is
kateanthony.com
/
which one is
survey or / where you get a curated thing.
Oh, the curated podcast playlist.
Yes, that's it.
I see.
Playlist. That's
/playlist. kateanthony.com /playlist.
Yeah.
There's I have a curated podcast playlist. I have 250 some odd episodes, right? And so and there's some of them are for people who are, happily getting an amicable divorce. Some of them people who are trying to decide whether to stay or go and they're being abused and they're right. And so if you sign up for that, take a little quiz, then I'll give you a list of like 12 episodes that are for you.
Right.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
You just signed up.
What would ours be like?
I know. If we did hot mess.
Chaos, right?
Yeah.
I hate my kids. Okay. Well, that would be episodes 2.
Yeah. Exactly.
50, no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
All the way through.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really
Just
cool.
kidding. We love our kids.
And so you're a divorce coach. And so what are some of the, like, what does that mean? Like,
Okay.
Like a therapist?
and maybe I need you.
Like a therapist. So I do a bunch of things.
Are you a post-divorce? Do you do post-divorce work too?
I do.
Okay.
And so I'm a co-parenting specialist. I'm a certified co-parenting specialist. I'm a domestic violence victims advocate. I just keep getting certified in various things because I'm a high conflict divorce coach. So I work with people going through and helping them create effective strategies for going through this, especially if it's going to be high conflict, to try to like minimize as much conflict as possible. I do work with divorce recovery because there's so much on that other side to deal with. I help women decide whether to stay or go. That's a huge, that's my book really, is about making the decision, and learning what's healthy, what's not healthy, what's okay with you, what's not okay with you.
You're going to get a lot of new clients from this.
Well, what are you doing at 2:00 today? About an hour.
I'm free.
So you got divorced. I just want to know how this came about for you too, like a little bit about you. So you got divorced. It was a shit show for a while.
Well, no, it was a shit show in the marriage. So I basically spent, and this is very common, I spent a good 2 to 4 years going, something's wrong. If I'm honest, it was the whole 10 years. But, I just kept thinking that I could fix it, right? And when I was trying to decide, I was really looking for a burning bush. I really was. I was like, come on, somebody I don't know, Morgan Freeman, somebody come and tell me what to do. And I asked a really close friend of mine, and we were in group couples therapy together, and because that's a thing, group couples therapy. And I was like, and he had been divorced before. And so I said, tell me, how do you know when you know? And his response is, when you know, you'll know. And I was like, but I don't know. And I did. When I did know, I finally knew, right? But the problem I was having at that time was I was successful. I was an actor. I was on a hit TV show. I was doing all the stuff on the outside, right? Everything looked real good. But on the inside, I was vacant. I was kind of Stepfordy, right? I describe myself as a head on legs. I just had no access to myself because of that systematic denying that I had to do in order to be in this marriage. And it was very abusive. It was a very emotionally abusive marriage. And then when I knew, right? And then it was this process of getting out. And then the divorce was actually great. But honestly, I think it's a crapshoot. I think it was just a stroke of luck that I was divorcing someone who it was more important to him to look like the greatest divorced dad ever. Than it was to continue to try to control me and ruin my life. But that's really I don't know that you can, and I've been doing this a long time, I don't know that you can determine that. I mean, there are certain things that you can determine that this person is going to make your life a living hell. Absolutely. But sometimes you really don't know which way they're going to go.
Right.
But then you said that you were kind of a mess post-divorce.
Then yes, I didn't know I was.
Right.
Yeah, because everything seemed fine. So it was okay, great. Now we're going to be best friends, right? And so it was more denial, more suppression. And while the abuse was spiking every single day, multiple times a day in the marriage, it would only spike maybe every month or so in divorce. And I thought I could handle that, right? And eventually, part of my process was going back to school to become a coach. I was done with being an actor. I'd been an actor for 30 years. I was done. I didn't want to do it anymore. I had a 3.5-year-old. I'm not going to be driving in LA traffic to auditions or all over town. Forget it. And so I needed to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. And so everyone was like, you should be a therapist. And I was like, I would rather put glass in my head. No. And someone said, what about coaching? And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And so I went to school and I went back to school to become a coach, and I really enjoyed it, and I was really good at it. And so I started that process. And as I was learning and doing that, I was regaining my sense of self. I was learning who I was again and what I was good at. And also learning that there had to have been a better process. I was really feeling like there had to have been a better process than you'll know when you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that I started learning more about domestic violence, and I started learning more about the complexities of emotional abuse and coercive control, and that I really just wanted to help women get out of these toxic and abusive relationships in a way that was better than, hang out and maybe someday you'll know, right? Like, there had to have been, and that was sort of what became what I do, is just finding a better way.
Right.
The antidote to when you know, you'll know.
Right.
I also think, especially for women, some women are not, like, sometimes the spouse is not that bad,
That's right?
And you can stay because you feel guilty, because you're like,
Sure.
well, the beginning of the relationship was great, but now I'm dealing with a guy that, like, I mean, let's say it has an alcohol problem, but it's not like, they're not like a raging alcoholic.
Sure.
It's like, but, or things that make them not the best partner.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do that for a really long time. And then there's I have some friends that have gone through this where they're like, it's not that bad, but it's not that good.
Right,
And,
exactly.
like,
Right, it's fine.
it's okay. And
He's
I kind of feel
fine.
bad because I don't want to leave him,
Right.
because for whatever reason, has depression, or he is dealing with mental illness, or he's dealing with all these things. And like, right?
Chapters in my book
Oh,
on
nice.
interesting.
what if he's an addict or mentally ill?
Oh my God.
Wow.
He's fine. Why can't I just be happy?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
I think that,
So-
that's important. The work you do for that as well. Like,
Exactly. And that's what I was saying before. Like,
when do we
deserve to
realize
be
what we
happy.
deserve? Exactly. Right.
Right, exactly. And we're so trained to believe that we, have to sacrifice everything, including our happiness, our bodies, ourselves, like everything, for the service of everybody else. And, I call bullshit. No more.
Wow. This has been like such a great, I'm learning a lot.
Excellent.
Yeah. And so people can get the name of the book is The D Word.
The D Word, Making the Ultimate Decision About Your Marriage. It's everywhere. I do have a page on my website, kateanthony.com/D Word, that also gives you some ideas about how to get it in ways that might be a little bit more subtle or secretive, because, so Audible, Kindle, Amazon, if you share an Amazon account with your spouse, buying this book might not be safe. Right. And so there's some ways that you can buy it, that you can find it, that might be a little bit more, safer,
Right.
subtle, right? Because this is not the thing that you want showing up at your house suddenly and then having to have conversations that you're not ready to have.
That's such a good point.
Or your
That's such a good
spouse
point.
looking at Amazon and going,
Right.
oh, recently bought the D word.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Wow, that is so
And the
interesting.
book does walk you through how to have the conversation, which is, I have a very specific formula for how to have the conversation, because so many women are like, I've tried to tell him like 5 times.
Right.
I've had this
They
conversation
don't know
so
how
many
to-
times, and he just he won't agree. And, my point is, this is not a conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
This is a declaration. You are stating a fact that
Right.
you are done with your marriage. So that's
You have
all
that.
in here as
And
well.
you have the podcast.
I have a podcast, the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. Everything is on my website, kateanthony.com. You can also find me on Instagram at the Divorce Survival Guide.
Oh my
Wow,
gosh, this has
Kate.
been amazing. You're so great.
I can't wait to talk to you off air.
Girl, call me.
I am. I will. Thank you, Stephanie, for bringing her in.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Kaylin.
Thanks,
you, Kate.
everybody.
You're a parent now.
Don't F it up.